You're listening to Mornings on the Mall with Brian and Larry. I'm Larry O'Connor, and sitting in for a vacationing Brian Wilson is Del Wilbur of Bloomberg News. You cover national security and also Justice Department issues.
And Homeland Security.
And Homeland Security. And specifically about justice issues, I think, will come in handy for this next topic, as President Obama will be visiting a federal prison in Oklahoma today, the very first sitting president to ever visit a federal prison. And he gave a preview of what he was going to do earlier this week as he spoke to the NAACP and talked very much about prison reform and most specifically some problems with sentencing. And yesterday, as he was previewing this as well, he said this.
I am very appreciative of folks like Dick Durbin and Cory Booker, alongside Mike Lee and Rand Paul and other folks in the House who are working together to see if we can both reduce some of these mandatory minimums.
Mike Lee, Senator of Utah, getting a shout out from the president, linking your name with Dick Durbin. Are you going to survive this back in Utah, Senator Lee?
Hey, look, it does happen. Bipartisan is alive and well.
Well, listen.
And, there are some issues that are just not partisan, and this is one of them. This is one of these things that's neither Republican nor Democratic. It's just an American issue.
Yeah, I agree, and I know I've heard you and Senator Rand Paul speaking out about some sentencing reforms and some prison reforms that could be very constructive and helpful. But I've got to ask you this, and I want to ask where you do meet with the president about this. But given the fact that you do want to have some progress working here, wouldn't it have been better for the president to come down Pennsylvania Avenue, work with you guys on Capitol Hill, and sort of move some legislation instead of what seems to be his, unilateral commutation of some sentences that he did earlier in the week, and going to this prison and sort of doing a big public show of it as if he's acting unilaterally? Why not work with you instead of just giving you a shout out?
In fairness to the president, he has worked with us on this, and he's reached out to me personally several times. He's had us down to the White House. We've talked to him a lot about it. I don't view his constitutional power to issue pardons and commutations of sentences to be inconsistent with backing legislation like this. I don't.
Okay.
What
working around us? I think he's acting in good faith here.
Okay.
Senator, what's your working relationship with Loretta Lynch, the new Attorney General, versus Eric Holder, who both really care about this issue, especially sentencing reform? Eric Holder in particular really pushed, to recalibrate, especially sentences for like crack cocaine use and things they found that were unfair in the criminal justice system.
I've made no secret about the fact that I disagree with Attorney General Loretta Lynch and previous Attorney General Eric Holder on a number of issues. On this particular issue, we happen to agree. And so on this particular issue, we've got a good working relationship. And I've met with the Deputy Attorney General, Sally Yates, the other day, talking about this issue as well. The administration has been quite helpful.
Well, what makes it, when you look at this, you're from Utah, and I don't think Utah has many of the kind of the chronic problems and issues that affected many urban inner city areas, where many of today's prison inmates came from in the drug era, the crack and heroin eras of the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And what brought you to this issue, and where did you get into it, and why?
Well, this isn't necessarily this isn't something that necessarily makes me any more or any less popular in Utah, but it's an issue that's important to me. I used to be a federal prosecutor, and while serving as a federal prosecutor, I saw instances in which federal judges would sentence a defendant and say, I think this sentence is excessive, but I have to impose anyway because I'm a federal judge, and Congress has set the law prescribing a particular minimum mandatory sentence here.
Mm-hmm.
And I wish Congress would change the law. So once I got here, I decided I had to try to do something about that. And there are modest but necessary adjustments that can be made and should be made in our federal minimum mandatory sentencing
So
system.
tell us what you would like to achieve here, what you've been working on with the president when he says prison reform, and are you speaking the same language, and what is it that you'd like to reform?
Yes. So bill that I'm pushing with Senator Durbin is called the Smarter Sentencing Act, and it has as its central feature the reduction of some of our minimum mandatory sentences, specifically in the category of non-violent, low-level drug offenses. And so you've got some instances where, based on the quantity of the drug that you've got with you, regardless of whether you're a big dealer, think El Chapo, or whether you're a courier or mule, based on the quantity of drugs that you have, you might get sent away for 5 years, 10 years, or 20 years based on that drug quantity. And we want to reduce those. We want to reduce the 5 minimum to 2. We want to reduce the 10 minimum to 5 and the 20 to 10.
And what do you say to people? What's your response when they say, well, basically this is letting a lot of people who are involved in this drug trade sort of off the hook with less of a punishment, and that's just going to encourage more criminal behavior?
It's not true. This does nothing to change the maximum sentence that these defendants can receive. It does change the minimum, and so what this does is it gives a little bit more discretion to the federal judge imposing the sentence to make sure that the punishment fits the crime. So for the most heinous offenders out there, they can still throw the book at them. But for those who are lower-level couriers or mules, the judge can use a degree of discretion in imposing a sentence, and should be able to do that.
Earlier on the show, we were talking about El Chapo, and you just mentioned him, the Mexican drug lord who escaped from prison yet again. I'm just wondering if you have any opinion on his escape and what the United States should be doing, to try to capture him again.
Yeah, it's really sad. This is not a model citizen, and we're grateful, I suppose, that he's not a United States citizen, but he is he's a menace to all around him. He has escaped. I am not overly hopeful that he'll be found. I actually think the United States is doing everything it can to try to apprehend him. But look, he lives in a country where apparently he had his own shower, and apparently people were able to dig a mile-long tunnel leading directly to that shower. This does not inspire confidence that he will ever be found. And
he has a Twitter feed.
Apparently. Yeah, and he's tweeting as well. Senator Lee, we've got to also ask you about the Iran nuclear deal. The ball is now in the Senate's court. Where do you stand on what you know about this deal and the details that have now been revealed? And what do you think the temperature is like in the Senate for possibly pushing through a veto-proof bit of legislation that would disapprove of this deal?
But I don't like the deal. As my friend Tom Cotton has said recently, the deal is not as bad as we feared. The deal is much, much worse than what we expected. This is a deal that does virtually nothing after 15 years, and what it does between now and 15 years from now isn't all that much. It isn't all that helpful. I intend to oppose it, and I hope that we can assemble a veto-proof, bipartisan supermajority to override a presidential veto of what I expect will be a resolution of disapproval.
Senator Lee, quickly, we only have 20 seconds. The president says his challengers have not offered an alternative. Do you have an alternative?
Well, I don't think that we have to have an alternative. We haven't been at the negotiation table with Iran. But I think what we ought to be doing, our alternative would be to increase sanctions, not lift them. And so we should have passed the Kirk-Menendez increased sanctions a year and a half ago. Had we done that, I think we'd be in a much better position. We got to be ratcheting sanctions up, not lifting them.
Thank you, Senator Lee. We got to leave it there. Always good to have you, though, sir.